Poland deployed weapons close to the Russian border to prepare for NATO exercises. Poles take to the streets to protest aid to Ukraine. Surprised by the number of slips of the tongue made by President Biden. Mr. Trump worries that it will be hard for the U.S. to survive if President Biden is re-elected. Poland deployed weapons close to the Russian border to prepare for NATO exercises. The Polish Armed Forces Command announced that the country's military equipment will be deployed near the Polish-Russian border from May 4 to 6 in the Warmian-Mazurian province as part of the Steadfast exercise. NATO defender. Please be especially cautious in the near future, because on the way you may encounter many military convoys. The peak of the exercise will take place from May 4 to 6 in the areas of the West Pomeranian and Warmian-Mazurian provinces. Sputnik, Russia, quoted the ministry's announcement as saying on social networks. Warmian-Mazurian is a province located in northeast Poland, bordering Russia's Kaliningrad region and the Baltic Sea. NATO launched the Steadfast Defender exercise in January. The exercise will last until the end of May and involve more than 90,000 soldiers from all 32 member countries. The second phase of the exercise focuses on deploying troops across Europe. During the exercise, the Allies plan to test a conflict scenario against a peer adversary. In January, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko said that the scale of the 2024 Steadfast Defender exercise showed NATO returning to Cold War plans to counter Russia. He added that these exercises are another element of the hybrid war waged by the West against Russia. Poles take to the streets to protest aid to Ukraine. Hundreds of Polish protesters gathered in downtown Warsaw on May 1, 2024, to call on the country's government to stop supporting Ukraine. On the morning of May 1, 2024, hundreds of protesters gathered in downtown Warsaw to call on the Polish government to stop supporting Ukraine. They say the government's stance ultimately risks drawing the country into war. Protesters then marched through the city carrying a large Polish flag and anti-war banners. The event, dubbed the Peace March, was organized by several local anti-war groups. Protesters were heard chanting slogans such as, "Not our war," as well as carrying many banners with messages such as, "Today our tanks, tomorrow children us." We do not agree to be drawn into someone else's war, we do not agree to become cannon fodder, we do not agree to unconditional and meaningless support for Ukraine, the famous political scientist Polish speaker Leszek Sikulski, one of the key figures behind the march, spoke during the event. It is known that Mr. Sikulski has always opposed military aid provided by Warsaw to Kiev, and for many years he has advocated building better relations with Russia. Poland has become one of Ukraine's main backers amid the ongoing conflict between Kiev and Moscow, which broke out in February 2022. Surprised by the number of slips of the tongue made by President Biden. The Daily Caller recently revealed that White House staff have revised U.S. President Joe Biden's public statements nearly 150 times this year. A White House written analysis recently revealed that U.S. President Joe Biden made so many errors in his public statements in 2024 that his aides were forced to correct them at least 148 times. The analysis, conducted by the conservative news website Daily Caller, and published on April 28, found that Mr. Biden made an average of nearly 1.3 errors per day in 2024. The analysis included 118 statements, speeches, and press meetings, for which the White House issued transcripts. The Daily Caller said the corrections range from correcting Mr. Biden's factual errors to adding words he should have included, to completely changing the meaning of the comments he made. For example, when President Biden said every American voted against his American Rescue Plan, he should have said every Republican. In another case, Mr. Biden mistakenly said that a threat to democracy must be protected, when the correct word should be defeated. The analysis also found that in one speech, Mr. Biden's State of the Union address last month, there were 13 corrections. Factual errors include Mr. Biden claiming 720 million Americans, more than double the country's population, have received COVID-19 vaccines. And when Mr. Biden mentioned a Georgia woman killed by an illegal immigrant, amid pressure from Republicans to say her name, he called her Lincoln instead of her name. Her correct name is Laken. Mr. Biden also referred to seniors with disabilities as seniors with diabetes. The Daily Caller said that they did not count many edits that did not change the meaning of President Biden's comments, such as adding the letter S to the end of a noun or adding a necessary word to make the meaning clearer. They also don't count edits that weren't clearly marked in the recording or obvious errors that were covered up. Mr. Biden's frequent mistakes have raised questions about his ability to run for president. Mr. Biden has been ranked as the oldest president in U.S. history at age 81, and he will be 86 years old at the end of his second term if he is elected next November. A New York Times poll published last month showed that 72% of American voters, including more than half of Democrats, agreed that Mr. Biden was too old to be a capable president. Can work effectively. Mr. Trump worries that it will be hard for the U.S. to survive if President Biden is re-elected. Donald Trump worries about America's future if he loses the election, criticizing President Biden for his handling of the economy and immigration. If we don't win this election, I don't think our country can survive. I'm going to say something I've felt for a long time, but have never stated publicly before. Former President Donald Trump told supporters at a campaign event in Waukesha, Wisconsin on May 1. Wisconsin is expected to be one of the battleground states that will witness a tense rematch between Mr. Trump and President Joe Biden in the November election. Mr. Trump's campaign said the former president is taking advantage of the events. Campaign to clearly contrast his first term of peace, prosperity, and security with Mr. Biden's failed presidency. Former President Trump criticized Mr. Biden's handling of the economy and immigration, saying that the U.S. president let the country be invaded by migrants. He also accused his Democratic opponent of being too passive in the face of a wave of pro-Palestinian student protests at universities across the United States. Observers say that Mr. Trump and his supporters are trying to convey the message that President Biden and the Democrats are destroying the country because of mistakes in border security and poor management of the economy. At the event in Waukesha, Mr. Trump also repeated his claim that President Biden is behind the 88 charges he is facing. I was indicted 4 times and faced civil trials. All came from the White House, he said. The former president repeatedly said that the prosecutions were part of a witch hunt to hinder his re-election efforts, but did not cite evidence. Donald Trump is the first former U.S. president to face criminal charges related to his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results and his handling of classified documents. In the past 2 weeks, he also had to attend the trials of the case of paying hush money to porn star Stormy Daniels and suppressing unfavorable information during his 2016 election campaign.